What's up, guys? Welcome to the Jay Martin Show, and this is my weekly rant. Now, last weekend, I was on a hike with my 5-year-old son, and we came across a river, and the river had this makeshift log bridge spanning across it. Now, my son would have been able to walk across this log bridge on his own, but with the river beneath it, I was a bit uncomfortable with the risk. Now, it wasn't obvious that had he fallen in, it would have been a huge problem, but it also wasn't obvious that had he fallen in, he would have been okay. It was kind of in that middle ground where had my son at 5 years old fallen into this river, he probably would have been okay, but it definitely was not guaranteed. So what I decided to do was hold his hand and walk across it with him. Now, later that night, here's the point. My brother and I were sitting around a campfire debating the necessity of risk taking and risk tolerance, especially of parents with young kids. Now, here's what happened earlier that day, right? I protected my son from what I deemed to be an unnecessary risk. But in exchange, I robbed him of two potential opportunities. Number one, him building the confidence to know that he could cross a log bridge over a river by himself. And number two, him learning the consequences of falling in a river, which is not the worst thing to understand. Now, this might seem trivial or my actions as a parent obvious. Maybe we just inherently want to protect our kids. But it did strike me as an important analogy for life preparedness because inevitably my son is going to reach another bridge and I'm not going to be there. And he's going to have to make a decision based on his life experience. And either he's going to know he's got the confidence and the competency to cross that bridge on his own, or he's going to understand the consequences of falling in a river. But he'll be able to calculate that risk himself and make an educated decision. But alternatively, having been robbed of that life experience, he won't know what to do. And he'll see the bridge as an unacceptable risk, one that he doesn't know how to calculate, and therefore complain that the bridge needs to be removed. We need to remove this threat. And that is safetyism. And that is a trend that we are seeing skyrocket through our societies. And I think we're all very familiar with it. Now, I acknowledge it's like the most challenging thing in the world to allow our children to take unnecessary risks. But in the absence of that, an entire generation emerges that believes the world is supposed to be safe. And it just isn't, and it never will be. Now, nothing in the natural world is static. The whole thing is fluid, therefore constantly changing, unpredictable, and never safe. So yesterday, let me put this in perspective of pop culture. I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw this comedian who was walking around downtown Miami taking selfies of himself with other people's supercars. And he was seeing, how far he could push his luck getting up close and personal with other people's supercars. Eventually, he actually sat down on the hood of a Lamborghini and started filming himself doing some commentary. Now, the owner of the Lamborghini got out and just started swinging. He cracked this guy and attacked him physically. Now, the comments beneath this post were just raging about toxic masculinity and the unacceptable response from the car owner. And yeah, maybe he took it too far. He probably did. But maybe if you sit your butt down on a stranger's piece of $500,000 private property, you just need to be prepared for the potential consequences. And the consequences might be that the owner laughs, gets out, and gives you a high five. Or the consequences might be that he shakes his head, honks his horn, and drives away. Or the consequences might be that he just gets out and starts swinging. But here's my point. The reaction from the man taking the selfie on the car, and from his camera crew who rushed out to break up the altercation, and from the hundreds of comments beneath the post, they all seem to agree that the world owed this man safety regardless of his actions. But I just believe that actions have consequences, and we don't always like them, but they occur regardless. Let me give you an example. Maybe if you decide to make fun of somebody's wife right in front of him and right in front of her, well on stage in front of thousands of other people, you might get punched in the mouth. Maybe that's an entirely realistic expectation. And I'm not saying I agree with it, right? But there's lots of things I don't agree with and they still happen anyways. I don't agree with floods or forest fires, but they occur. We can surround ourselves with concrete and plastic, but we still live in the wilderness and human beings are part of that wilderness. But let me be clear, I do not support reactive violence in any way, shape, or form. And there is a different way to approach situations like this, but it requires us to make some changes. In traditional Lakota culture, there was a role known as the Hayoka, the sacred clown. Now, the role of the Hayoko was to make fun of everything and everybody all the time. Through comedy and satire, they would poke fun, they would ask probing questions, and they would say the things that people were scared to say, forcing us to examine our own hatreds, our own fears, our own insecurities, our doubts, and our weaknesses. Now, the purpose of the Hayoko was to prevent people from taking themselves too seriously or from believing they were more powerful than they were. They were constantly stress testing the core beliefs of the community and shining a light on their insecurities. And as the name reflects, the Hayoko was sacred and could not be canceled for picking the wrong target. Now, I know that sounds familiar. The sacred clown's use of humor would reduce inter-society violence, conflict, and division. And it would actually inspire evolution and innovation because it would separate people from their ideas. Nothing was off limits. Everything was eligible for mockery, forcing people to understand that we are not our ideas and that all ideas are transitory and should never define a people or a person. Now, I just find the sacred clown concept to be such a beautiful antidote to both hubris and fragile ideology. Silencing offensive people and ideas feeds an expectation of a safe world and therefore guarantees that we become blindsided when the world's true nature occurs. The world is not safe, nor should it be. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments. The emergency inflation briefing is coming up on September 7th, right here on our YouTube channel. We have received hundreds of newsletter responses, YouTube comments, Twitter comments asking us for strategies to invest through an inflation cycle because we haven't seen inflation numbers like this in over 40 years. Therefore, any investors or money managers who experienced that have since retired. So what we're gonna do is bring in a bunch of experts that I respect and listen to what they have to say in terms of how they are allocating their capital. Now, I'm a firm believer that nobody has the correct strategy. People are too unique, our risk tolerances are all different. So what we can do is hear from as many experts as possible, steal from their perspectives and strategies, and then craft our own strategy that will work best for us. So on September 7th, right here on the YouTube channel, we are hosting the Emergency Inflation Briefing. And I will be joined by Danielle DiMartino Booth, the author of Quail Intelligence, Luke Groman, the founder of Forest for the Trees, Andy Scheckman, president at Miles Franklin Precious Metals, Sandeep Singh, CEO and president of Osisko Gold Royalties, plus one earlier stage gold development story that I'm quite excited about. September 7th, right here on the YouTube channel, the Emergency Inflation Briefing. Come by, say hi, ask questions. I'll be there. Hope you're there too.